I mean, we've still, up to this point, not really had a plot at all in this game, but that's fine, I guess. But now you'll actually help? Great! Shadowgate 64. Oh god, it's this game. Okay. So, this is a game that I have words for, and very few of them are polite. To its credit, as someone who has streamed virtually every N64 game in human history, I can tell you it's one of all of like 2 PC-style adventure games that the N64 got, and all of 1 that we got in North America, so there's that. But let me explain. This is one of those games. You know the ones I'm talking about, right? You know, games like Glover or Gex. One of those games that is always at your local video store, because no one ever rents them. And the only reason you would ever rent them is because there's nothing else there, and you only have one N64 game. And you can't beat Banjo-Kazooie because it has 2 collectibles you can't get, and that stupid quiz at the end is too hard, so you gotta rent something. So you rent Shadowgate 64, and then it makes you sad because it's not all that great a game. See, specifically for me, I rented this game a lot because everything else was taken, you know? No Blast Corps Mischief Makers for me, I'm afraid. And I hated this game because it was one of those games that required a save pack, and I didn't have one of those. Now, I know what you're gonna say. Fury, that's really more of an issue of the time and a technical restraint, and really shouldn't necessarily be something that makes you actively hate the game. And you know, I agree, because Mystical Ninja had the exact same problem, but I actually remember that game quite fondly, even though I couldn't save in it. No, this game is just badly made, and it's frustrating beyond all belief. I rented this game so many times, and the thing is, if you're not familiar with Shadowgate, it was an old PC point-and-click adventure that I think had a Game Boy Color version, and it definitely had an NES version, and it was happy to kill you left, right, and center without warning. This game doesn't quite live up to that reputation, but it certainly tries in places, and if you die, you start all the way back at your save. And if you can't do that, you go all the way to the beginning, where you then have to sit there and watch a minute-long cutscene of some random guy throwing you in a jail cell. And you have to do that over and over every single time you die, or make one wrong move. I got very, very intimately familiar with this cutscene is what I'm saying, and I'm terrified to think exactly how many hours of my life that cutscene has killed. So, I memorized every single death for the first 60 or so % of the way through the game. And just as I was about to beat it as a kid, I somehow glitched into the final dungeon of the game with no way of actually solving any of the puzzles and no way of getting out. And then I never played the game again. But somehow, in my terrible memory, I have all the deaths in this game memorized to the point where I had to do something with it just for closure. So I streamed it. I beat the game in its entirety. And now I'm gonna review it because this game owes me. So the story to Shadowgate 64 is, well, it's hard to explain. It's non-existent, it's terrible, and then for one teeny tiny moment in the game, it actually has some really brilliant writing. And that's probably a very confusing way to have said this, but this game's story is really bizarre. So you ostensibly play some guy named Dell, and Dell sucks. He can't swim, he can't fight, he can't really do anything, and somehow he's our protagonist. He's probably our protagonist because he expressly sucks, so we get to watch him die a whole bunch so we can watch that stupid cutscene over again. Either way, Dell is hanging out with this caravan that gets attacked by bandits, and some city guards think everyone involved is a bandit, so they throw them all in jail, including you. That's where the game begins. For the next 60% or so of the game, the whole plot of the game is, you know that place you currently are right now? Find a way to be somewhere else. It's not that where you are is particularly dangerous, but there's gotta be somewhere else that's more interesting. Like, seriously, for the first 60% of the game, the plot is go somewhere else for want of something to do. So you somehow escape your prison cell, you end up in the sewers, and you find a mysterious ghost that tries to interact with you. Remember this will be important. Eventually you get out of the sewers and you end up in this first dungeon tower thing with a cat. That makes no sense because there's no way for the cat to get in. And you can't interact with this cat, and I was terribly sad. But there's another ghost that talks to you. Again, this will be important later. And then you clear 2 more dungeons and get some random inn answering a reading comprehension test to then be actually told what the plot is. It is here where you learn that some random lady just decided to manipulate events so that you got thrown in jail so you could rescue her brother, which you do in about a minute and a half. At which point, they disappear saying you should come with us, and your character just says, nah, I'm cool here. I've got nondescript destiny and stuff, leaving everyone in the plot confused. And then you are proceeded to have the entire rest of the game, which doesn't have all that much, but you have that one second ghost who's trying to lead you to your destiny, even though he tells you absolutely nothing about anything in the most awkward exposition dumps ever, up to the point where he will actively say, yo, I can finally help you, I'm gonna do everything in my power to help you, and he proceeds to still do nothing over the course of the rest of the game. Ostensibly, the plot at this point is there's some evil wizard that is trying to summon an even eviler wizard, and you have to stop him somehow by just wandering around doing stuff. Now, maybe there's substantially more better explained plot if you read all of the books in the game, but that's slow and boring, and ain't no one got time for that. Aside from, once again, the aforementioned reading comprehension tests, which there are 2 in the game, and the second one, if you get any question wrong, you can waste about 5 minutes getting back to do it again, especially if you can't save. And having your entire plot basically hinge on not having a plot and then nothing but exposition is god-awful. But what's even worse is it's inconsistent, because when you get to the second dungeon in the game, you get a magical ring that lets you interact with ghosts. Except that your mentor you've been interacting with like 5 times up till now is a ghost that somehow interacted with. And then of course, there was a random ghost in the sewer. You could interact with him somehow without this ring. So where's the consistency with the mechanics of this plot? I genuinely don't know. And then of course, for some reason in the first dungeon there was just a random bench that got knocked over that you'd think would involve a ghost but doesn't seem to, and that's never explained. So yeah, the plot's bad, but you might recall that I did say about 6 minutes ago that there was in fact a small teeny tiny glimmer of actual brilliant writing in this game. And the funny thing is, compared to everything else in the game, it's the bit that doesn't involve a single word. See, if we rewind all the way back to the start, and we are in the sewers, right next to that random ghost we first see that we shouldn't be able to see because we don't have the Ring of the Dead yet, well, he's the first part of this really interesting plot because we see this random skeleton. Now, this is actually inaccurate because we realize he's died recently, and really he should be a corpse, but I guess they didn't want to render that or something. Either way, in the room next to him, you see a stone hallway with a hole dug out of one wall and a pickaxe next to it. This is all entirely environmental storytelling as to what's going on here. You learn very quickly that there were 2 thieves, one of which was the first ghost you ran into, that found a random staff in the wall, which is one of the most important MacGuffins in the game, and you won't see until, like, the final room of the game. They just pickaxed a wall and found it. And then they tried to auction it, but one of the guys said, hey, this might be evil, let's not do that, and the other guy pickaxed him to death. And all of that is said without a single word. That is brilliant storytelling by environment right there. I love environmental storytelling, and this game clearly shows someone who was working on this game actually knew what they were doing, which makes all of one person for at least one brief moment in time. Unfortunately, everything else about the game in terms of its writing and its story is terrible, not to mention inconsistent, and that's when it's actually there. The gameplay too, Shadowgate 64 is, well, it's a first-person point-and-click adventure, so that means collecting a lot of random objects and using them effectively as weird-shaped keys for weird-shaped locks. And it has problems. First of all, about a third of the items in the game are entirely useless, for really no reason. You can collect a bunch of money to take to a pawn shop that does absolutely nothing. You can trade them to the shop owner, but none of the items he gives you are actually of any value whatsoever. There's random items in the game that feel like they should be used for a puzzle that just aren't. And in fact, you know what? This is something else that really bugged me about the game. There are like 4 of the earliest items you get in the game that are all used for the same purpose, except you can't use them for the same purpose. Let me explain. So all the way back in the very first room of the game, to escape your jail cell, you have to get a bone, which you then use as a crowbar to pry up a latch. In literally the next room, you get a metal pipe, which you then use in the next room as a crowbar to knock a pillar down. You then, 2 rooms later, get a pickaxe, which in a weird moment of letting you use an item twice, which happens at no other point in the game, you can climb a wall as well as break through a hole in the ceiling, even though you don't have any sort of rope to climb up, and you need one of those later, so, again, inconsistency of mechanics game, but whatever. But it's a pickaxe. You could, probably use it as a crowbar if push came to shove. At the start of the second dungeon, you get an actual honest-to-God crowbar. And then, just as your friends that you rescued out of prison disappear, you then have to go to their house, and then find that one of their bedposts looks a little different, to learn that it's a lever, which you need for a specific puzzle. This is where I stopped as a kid because I could not find this lever because I didn't notice, because who would? It looks identical to everything else. But then you have to use that as a lever for a puzzle, like I said. Well, there's two other items, a broken spear and a broken sword, that could very easily be used effectively as a crowbar. And you know what a crowbar is? Mechanically speaking, a crowbar is nothing but a lever. Leverage is the functional principle by which a crowbar operates. None of these items that all do literally the same thing, or should in the case of the two broken weapons, can be used here. You just need the bedpost, because this bedpost was specifically designed as a lever for this puzzle. And then the owner of this bedpost, who was that guy you freed from prison, just stole it and used it as a bedpost, because he's a dick. I don't know, and I'm angry about this, because I couldn't see this, and somehow from here I glitched into the final dungeon and was trapped and had to restart as a kid, and that traumatized me. After so much death. Oh god. You know, kind of like I said at the start, this game is ostensibly a sequel to Shadowgate. You know, Shadowgate, the PC adventure game that would kill you left, right, and center without any warning and then laugh at you for being the moron who did that. This game feels like it's at odds with itself for that, because it's more than happy to kill you out of nowhere, but at the same time it's more than happy to walk that back and say, no, that's just cruel to the players, let's not do that. So again, going all the way back to your cell at the start of the game, you are safe until the next room. If you go to one extreme side of this room, in the first room of the sewers, you will die because your character sucks and can't swim. If you go through one of the specific doors that leads to the second room of the game and walk one step in any direction, you will die instantly. After that room, the game then decides to, I don't know, lull you into a false sense of security, because for the next 30% of the game, you cannot die in any capacity. And just as you're starting to feel safe, thinking, you know, I can't die here, I'm gonna go to the second dungeon, oh, you fell through a hole in the ceiling, because you weren't looking at your feet, because who would? And when you get to that second dungeon, they then bestow upon you two items that if you just use them from your inventory, you will die instantly. This game is straight up dickish about that. I almost wish it would have killed me every 3 steps, because at least then I'd know it was actively malicious and designed by someone who doesn't want you to enjoy your life. And don't even get me started about the inconsistency of some of this stuff. While you can just use a random object from your inventory and kill yourself without warning, the game will actively stop you from something that's blatantly going to kill you. Like, in the second dungeon, there's a fire pit, and you need to douse the fire with something. You can douse it with oil, and the game will say, whoa, 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 whoa. You decide not to do that, because that's a really bad idea. But at the same time, the game's more than happy to just let you drink random potions in your inventory and die instantly without any idea what any of them do. So, yeah, it kind of hates the player, but at the same time, it wants to be merciful, and I genuinely don't understand this game. It feels like it's more tricking me into feeling safe, only so that it can kill me down the line, in a worse, stupider way. This game, man, I hate this game so much. If you walk slightly in the wrong direction, you can just fall into a pit and die, because for whatever reason, someone decided to dig up the entire countryside around the town, and I just don't understand it. I kind of appreciate that after the first 40 or so % of the game, you then sort of have a vaguely open world environment for about 6 rooms, but it just feels inconsistent with the rest of the game. Up to this point, it's entirely linear, puzzle solving, and now you're just given like this relatively open world space that is more confusing than anything and is more likely to get you killed. And don't even get me started about that one puzzle in the third dungeon. I got this the first time I went through, and the only reason I got it first time through was because at this point I trained myself to realize this game is made by people that hate you. It is a maze where you have to carry a lit candle, which is on a timer, to the end. And in order to do this, you have to walk to the end, then back, then the end, then back, then the end, hitting various switches along the way. And only by doing that in the right order and finding the slight variations in your path will you actually get there. That puzzle, even as a child, I never got there because I couldn't get to the third dungeon, but I read guides because I was trapped in the fourth dungeon trying to figure out what I was supposed to do, and I remember just reading people complain about that puzzle. It earned this game a reputation, and it was bad. And even before that, in the second dungeon, there's just a randomized teleporter maze, which honestly I did have a lot of trouble with because it's annoying and stupid. And if you get it just wrong, you get teleported so far back, you have to then walk for about 5 minutes to get to the start of the maze. This game is not challenging, it's not puzzling, it's just dickish. And even when you get to the end of that dungeon, you have one final puzzle where you have to mix potions, and if you mix it slightly wrong, you're dead. And that is assuming the game understands that you're clicking on the bowl to mix potions with, because the detection in this game's a little spotty, and one of the potions you need to mix in that bowl is one that will kill you instantly. So if the game doesn't think that you're, aiming at that bowl, you'll just gulp it all down and die. I hate this game. I'm not sure if I've made that clear yet, but Shadowgate 64 is a really utterly bizarre game that is entirely inconsistent. The puzzles aren't smart, and it's just badly explained. The story is badly written when it exists. The gameplay is obtuse and inconsistent all over the place. And I assume maybe you can get out of some of those deaths if you read the books, but that actively takes you out of the game. Why would I ever bother doing that? On top of the fact that my N64 has to load each page individually, and that is slow and crap. And reading books is only one way, so if you skip a page or you misread something and you want to go back, you have to finish the book and then read it again all the way from the start. This game sucks. If you're someone who wants a long game, it's not that long either. Like, I'm not good at this game, but I did at least have the first half or so of the game kind of memorized, at least in terms of death, and when I played through it, I got it done in 2.5 hours. It's not super long, it's not super complicated, but it will actively kill you in the weirdest, most inexplicable moments because you did something wrong that this game wasn't going to tell you about, or because the hit detection on stuff is just bad. And you know what's really awful about a game that involves picking up random crap? If they actively hide that random crap. When you get to the second dungeon, there is a key you need in order to advance. That key is hidden behind a pillar, and even if you know it's there, you get right up to it, you crouch down to look at it, you might not see it because it blends into the muddy textures. This game has you pixel hunting in a game that uses polygons. Everything about this game feels frustrating and annoying, and I absolutely hate that. And the saddest thing of all is there are brief moments of actual, connection I have to this game that I think this game could actually be kind of, sort of, maybe a little good. It all gets flushed down the toilet. The overall presentation to Shadowgate 64 is honestly the one thing I would say is unequivocally great about, except for the animations. The animations are very jank, very slow, and very awkward, and they're not good. But this game has atmosphere for days. The visuals look great. It's fun to actually wander around these environments and just look at stuff. It's gloomy, and sure, all the textures kind of bleed together because they're not super sharp or anything, but it creates a real mood. I remember when I was in the very first dungeon of the game, it's effectively just a school and you have no idea what's going on. You're just wandering around collecting stuff, but I wanted to figure out what the mystery of this place was. I was genuinely quite engaged when I first played this. Just before you get into the first dungeon, where you find that one stone corridor where there's a chunk of the wall taken out, there's really spooky music in the background that genuinely terrified me as a kid. This game absolutely gets atmosphere. Unfortunately, once again, the animations are kind of crap, and while I think the music is decent enough, there's not really all that much of it. They reuse both the first dungeon's theme as well as the overworld, where you spend the majority of the game, is basically identical, and that will get burned into your head for a while. And worst of all, it's really, really quiet. You have to crank your music to actually listen to anything in this game, which is kind of a shame because it's one of the few things about this game that I think is actually kind of good. Overall, the presentation to Shadowgate 64 is honestly the one really good thing about it. And I mean, it's all relative now, but yeah, I think this game does what it sets out to, and it does it fantastically. Now, if you want a copy of Shadowgate 64 on the N64, cheapest copy on eBay right now is $50. This game is not worth it. Again, if you want a long game, it's maybe 4 hours if you've never played this game before, and if you just go by instinct, and I mean, we assume that you can save anyway. If you can't save, this game might take substantially longer. I can attest to that, but yeah, I had the first half of the deaths memorized at the very least, and I managed to beat this game in 2.5 hours. And it's not a good game. It's inconsistent in its writing, in its tone, as well as in its gameplay. It doesn't know if it wants to be a very linear sort of point-and-click adventure or an open-world one, so it tries to be both, and it fails at both. The writing is non-existent for the first half of the game, which, narrative is important in an adventure game, and you just don't get it for eons. And when you get it, it's disappointing, generic, and just bad. Aside from that one moment where you get to see a little bit of visual storytelling in the environment, and you actually get to piece together what happened there from what you saw, there's nothing to the writing in any capacity. This game is one of 2 point-and-click adventures the N64 ever got, and that is probably the most this game can boast. It's not good in any real capacity, and the only reason I'm talking about this now is because I felt this game owed me after all the time I'd wasted watching that stupid intro cutscene of some guy throwing me in a jail cell because I died because this game did something, such as trapping me in the final dungeon with no means of escape or solving any of the puzzles. This game owed me this closure, and now I've done this, and hopefully I can somehow get rid of all of the memories I have of this game, because I don't ever want to think about this game again. Shadowgate 64, it's not worth your time. Mix some stuff, so I think we want Night Elixir, and hopefully the game understands we want to pour it in there, or we'll die. I should probably save, honestly. I think it's Forest Nectar, but let's find out. Oh no, did I kill myself? Yep, I did. Because this is Shadowgate.